The stock market is not a mystery. It only pretends to be one. Behind every wild rally and every gut-wrenching crash lies a rhythm, a language that most people never learn to read. But over a century ago, one man dared to translate it. His name was Richard D. Wyckoff. And he didn't just study the market. He listened to it breathe. Before Wyckoff, the average trader believed Wall Street was a casino luck, whispers, and hope. After Wyckoff, the best traders began to see it as a stage play, one with actors, scripts, and patterns that repeated again and again. And if you could read those patterns, you could see the plot before it unfolded. Tell me, do you believe the market is random, or do you think there's a hidden logic behind every move? Comment your thoughts below. When Richard D. Wyckoff first stepped onto Wall Street in 1888, he was only 15 years old, a boy among wolves. He worked as a stock runner, sprinting through the crowded streets with handwritten orders while the smell of ink, tobacco, and fear filled the air. Wall Street back then wasn't a digital fortress. It was chaos incarnate, men shouting prices, brokers waving papers, and fortunes changing hands before lunch. It was also ruthless. The market wasn't yet policed by regulators or algorithms. It was an era of financial titans: J.P. Morgan, E.H. Harriman, James R. Keen, names that could send prices soaring or collapsing with a single rumor. These men didn't trade stocks, they controlled them. To most, it was terrifying. To Wyckoff, it was fascinating. He watched, listened, and took notes. Every rise and fall was a clue. Every panicked sale, every sudden rally, it all meant something. The market was alive. It had moods, tempers, and patterns that repeated like seasons. And Wyckoff wanted to understand its psychology. He noticed something deeply human. The crowd lost money not because the market was unfair, but because people were. They acted on emotion. They were greedy when they should be cautious, hopeful when they should be realistic, and terrified when they should be calm. A man might spend his life building a business carefully, only to gamble it all away in a single impulsive trade. Wyckoff wrote, "The average man who enters Wall Street is mentally lazy, not stupid lazy. He wanted shortcuts, tips, and secrets instead of the slow discipline of study and observation." This, Wyckoff realized, was why the market was such a brutal teacher. It punished impatience, ignorance, and arrogance, and it rewarded only those who learned its true rhythm. So Wyckoff began his education not in a university, but in the trenches of human behavior. He tracked prices by hand. He paper traded for years before risking real money. Every night, he studied railroad companies and industrial reports. He wasn't chasing quick profits, he was mapping the heartbeat of the market. Through this process, he discovered a foundational truth. Price doesn't move because of news, it moves because of people. Every tick up or down is a record of collective emotion, fear, greed, hope, translated into numbers. But as Wyckoff learned more, he began to see another layer, something darker and more powerful. The market wasn't just an emotional battlefield between small traders. It was orchestrated by those who understood how emotion could be used as a weapon. He saw that large operators, what he later called the Composite Man, manipulated markets, not through luck, but through strategy. They bought quietly when everyone else was scared. They sold loudly when everyone else was euphoric. And the public, guided by emotion instead of logic, willingly handed over their wealth again and again. This realization was both thrilling and horrifying. Wyckoff wasn't just studying stocks anymore, he was decoding human nature under pressure. And from that moment, his life took on a mission: to reveal how the game was really played, and to teach ordinary people to play it like insiders. He would go on to observe men like J.P. Morgan and Jesse Livermore firsthand, uncovering the psychology that moved billions. But it all started with one question, a question that still haunts traders today. If the crowd always loses, who is the crowd losing to? That question became Wyckoff's obsession and the key to unlocking what he called the science of market operations. They say once you see behind the curtain, you can never go back. For Richard Wyckoff, That curtain was the ticker tape, a thin ribbon of paper that whispered the truth long before the newspapers did. But with truth came temptation, and a dangerous understanding of how easily the market and human nature could be controlled. Wyckoff's apprenticeship on Wall Street transformed from curiosity to revelation. He was no longer watching price movements. He was watching intentions. Each surge of volume, each sudden drop, it was like reading the pulse of a living organism. The tape, to Wyckoff, was not just numbers. It was the diary of the Composite Man, that invisible operator who planned, bought, sold, and profited in silence, while the crowd screamed in confusion. Imagine standing in a broker's office in 1905. The ticker machine clicks like a heartbeat. Men crowd around, eyes glued to the tape, breath held. A stock suddenly jumps 2 points. "It's breaking out!" someone yells. The crowd rushes to buy. But Wyckoff stands still. He sees something they don't. The volume spike isn't confirmation. It's a trap. The Composite Man is distributing, not buying. The public thinks strength. Wyckoff sees exhaustion. That moment, that duality, was the paradox of his life. He could now see the manipulation. But what was he supposed to do with that knowledge? If you discovered how the market's insiders manipulate emotion, would you expose it or use it to profit? Be honest. Comment your thoughts below. Wyckoff's journals from that period are filled with psychological tension. He wrote that the market was the greatest theater of human weakness ever conceived. He wasn't exaggerating. Every panic, every boom, every speculative frenzy, it was a mirror reflecting the same primitive emotions that had driven men for centuries. Fear of missing out, hope of redemption, refusal to accept loss. In the early 1900s, the so-called bucket shops fed on those emotions like parasites. These establishments allowed customers to bet on stock prices without actually owning the stock. They were casinos with financial wallpaper designed to exploit impatience and greed. Wyckoff observed that most of their profits came not from market direction, but from the consistency of human error. Traders repeated the same mistakes, over and over, as if hypnotized. He realized something few understood at the time. The market doesn't need to deceive you. You deceive yourself. Wyckoff began mapping this pattern into what he called the logic of supply and demand in motion. He saw that when the crowd felt fear, selling pressure increased, supply swelled. When the crowd felt hope, demand surged, prices followed. But here's the twist. The insiders, the Composite Man, always acted opposite the crowd's emotion. When the public panicked, they accumulated quietly. When the public grew euphoric, they distributed patiently. It was manipulation, yes, but also discipline. Because while the public was emotional, the operators were calculating. This realization struck Wyckoff deeply. He was studying men who played the market like chess grandmasters, but they were also predators. J.P. Morgan would orchestrate financial panics to consolidate control. James Keene would float rumors to lure buyers. E.H. Harriman would starve a stock of liquidity until it broke the competition. These were not random events, they were campaigns. Wyckoff admired their precision and resented their ethics. The paradox tore at him. He had built a front-row seat to the greatest financial theater of his time, but what he saw made him uneasy. Because to truly beat the market, you had to think like those who moved it. And that meant studying manipulation so closely that you risked becoming part of it. He once wrote, "To protect the public, one must first learn to trade like the operator." It was both a warning and a confession. And so, Wyckoff began to codify what he saw into principles not just for trading, but for understanding behavior. He turned manipulation into method, emotion into data, chaos into law. His first law, supply and demand, was brutally simple. When demand exceeds supply, prices rise. When supply exceeds demand, prices fall. But to truly see it, you must read the footprints left behind in volume and price. His second cause and effect was the architect's blueprint. Every major move in price has a preparatory phase, a cause, built through accumulation or distribution. The longer and quieter the preparation, the larger the coming move. And his third effort versus result was the lie detector. If volume expands, great effort. But price barely moves, poor result. Someone powerful is on the other side. If effort and result align, the trend is genuine. If they diverge, prepare for reversal.